This is Carson Dudick. I am part of the Black History at SMU Oral History Project. We are interviewing Byron Sanders on July 11th in the Big Thought office of Dallas. So let's start with, when and where were you born?
I was born September 9th, 1983 in Houston, Texas at Herman Hospital, same room as my brother the year before, as they would have it. At least that's what I was told. I don't remember.
What was your neighborhood like?
You know, I was born in Houston, so I don't remember it. So just with my sentient life, I'm a Dallas kid. And I grew up in a few different neighborhoods. Had an interesting kind of inner city, suburb experience growing up. You know, for a period of time, we covered DeSoto, Glen Heights, which is deep South DeSoto, Pleasant Grove, Oak Cliff. And, you know, if I had to look at all of those, I would say I probably spent the majority of my waking, most formative hours in Oak Cliff. And that's school, that's church, that's football, track. So if I had to identify what community I feel like I am most a part of, it's Oak Cliff in Dallas.
What was that like?
You know, it was interesting. Growing up, both of my parents were in the house, but I would be dishonest if I were saying that that in and of itself was, you know, a bit of a virtue for my upbringing. We grew up in a household where there was a fairly frequent domestic violence. So my dad would beat my mother, and my earliest memories are of violence. But it's weird too, because he was also a very loving father. So he would tell me and my brother that he loved us. He would hug us all the time. He taught us how to read. It was this weird juxtaposition, and it created some things in me that showed up. And actually they kind of manifested later on at SMU in a period of time that was a defining era in my life. I remember growing up, we were always busy. We were always doing something. And I got to know from a very young age that busyness, that involvement, I use that as a defense mechanism. I use it as a defense mechanism for myself, but I also use it as a way to protect my mother. When I talk about a defense mechanism for myself, every time I was in an out of school time program or an after school or a summer program or sports, I felt like I had a safe space. I felt like I had a place where I could breathe, where I could let my shoulders down, right? I wasn't walking on eggshells, which is definitely the way it was always at home. The other reason why I loved it and really craved and actually sought out a lot of things to do. If it wasn't theater, it was Odyssey of the Mind. It was track. It was football. It was improv. I was always looking for something to do, and it added all these different really cool experiences to myself. I think it was a big part of why I'm actually doing the work that I'm doing today. But at the time, also I was doing it because I knew that every time I brought home good news, anytime I could bring home a sticker or a medallion or a trophy or a good report card or even just a good report, I knew that my dad would be happy. It would make him proud. And that happiness was a distraction that would lighten the room and minimize the likelihood or risk of another fight, another attack. And I preferred to do that rather than call the police or even entertain some of the other ideations that I would have about how to just make Dad go away. It was interesting. It created this whole notion of me being and actively going out to be a fixer. I would own the responsibility of making sure that things were okay at home. And I would do it in the means that I figured out worked really well. I did everything I could to make people laugh. Did everything I could to make people smile, to make people happy and proud. Because I knew that those were the emotions that would buffer and protect my mom. And I carried that with me, and to this day, there's still elements of that. It can be a good thing, but also taken to its extremes, it can also be a bad thing. I've seen both sides of that.
You mentioned you had a brother. Do you have any other siblings?
No, it's just me and my brother, and my older brother.
Are you guys close?
That's a great question. Yes, and also, you know, there's some really deep differences. For a while in life, I would say that we were on very divergent paths. And I would say that it probably has affected us even to this very day. I mean, it's something I'm dealing with right now. There's a conversation that I need to have with him based on some things that he you know, rightfully brought up, but I think it's opened the door for us to go to a place where we haven't before. But it's also kind of the tale of two brothers. It talks about when you grow up in a community and you're in a certain setting, either at school or wherever else, even in spite of a mother who was all about education, in spite of a father who would really stress education, neighborhood influences, peer influences can still draw a young person to a space that might not be in their best interest and can really even counteract much of the very intentional work that a loving, caring family tries to do. So I say all of that because your community matters, right? Opportunities, experiences, because it's not just what happens in one's own individual household. The entire environment contributes to where a young person will go. And so my brother actually ended up making some very different decisions, a lot of them that weren't in anyone's best interest: drugs, crime, and he nearly lost his life because of it. He had an incident where, he just had a breakdown and ended up setting himself on fire. I remember those days in Parkland for multiple days with his recovery. Thank God for that institution. Their burn unit's one of the best in the country. And my brother's probably here with us today because of that work, but he had to go through some really tough stuff in his life. And he's back on the right track though. He's made a recovery, he's kind of come back. He's in school, he's doing great in school, but he had to go the prodigal path in order to get back where he was. And I wonder if he would have had to go that direction, one, if we didn't grow up in a household of trauma, and two, if I think he saw himself differently in the environments and some of the surroundings that we were in.
And so going back to your neighborhood, would you say Oak Cliff was diverse?
No. No, Oak Cliff was not diverse. We got one white kid in 6th grade. I remember his name was Rick. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what Martin Luther King was talking about. We got a white kid. And it was funny because I was pretty excited. You know, I was like, hey, there's a white kid here. And then he was a jerk. I'm like, man, you messing up the dream, brother. What's wrong with you? but anywho, it was not a diverse community. But I'll tell you one thing that I got from that. One, Del Turner, my elementary school in Oak Cliff, kind of the Redbird area off of Polk, was wonderful. I loved my teachers. It felt more like family even than a school. They're some of the most profound educators that I've had in my life. And I know they taught me something in math and reading and writing because I was able to continue to progress. But the lessons that I remember the most were the ones that imbued me with a sense of cultural pride, sense of self. I could go from Adele Turner anywhere in this world and feel like one, could be proud of who I was. I can be proud of being a black man. I can be proud of being and spending a large chunk of my time in Oak Cliff. And I carried it like a badge of honor as opposed to feeling like it would be something that I would need to hide. I got that largely from my experiences in school and in church. I learned the Negro National Anthem at school in Oak Cliff at Adele Turner. I got my first public speaking and on stage experiences there. I learned that I was decent in football there. Like I learned so much. And so much of that was social and emotional as opposed to just purely academic. It was really a blessing, that school. It was a jewel.
So how would you describe race relations nationwide growing up?
You know what's really interesting? The reason why I was at Adele Turner was because of racism. When I first started school, I think at that moment, we had just moved to kind of the DeSoto, Glen Heights area. And I think we were previously in Pleasant Grove, maybe in one of the apartments in Oak Cliff, but we had just moved. And I was going to pre-K, I believe. I was in pre-K. And I remember being called a nigger, and I wasn't able to play Legos with these kids based on them saying what I was. I had no context for this word, and they didn't really explain it very well, so it was like, I was like, huh, that's interesting. All I know is that you're not letting me play Legos, so I got a problem with that, right? Well, I'm assuming I went home and told my parents what happened, and the next thing I can remember, I always wonder why. I asked my mom and dad, I was like, why was this the strategy? Mississippi Burnings was out in movies, and I saw that movie, and I was like, what? It was horrifying, perplexing, but that's how I got introduced to racism. Actually, I got introduced in school, in pre-K, but I learned what it actually was in conversations with my mom and my dad and seeing that movie. And I never forgot that. And so ever since then, I've been really aware of race. I've been really aware of racism and how it shows up both explicitly and implicitly. And I would say that's why my parents wanted me to be in a community like Adele Turner. I think that's why I went to that school. So I needed, again, a safe place, but more importantly, I needed a place that was going to invest in the joy and the pride of being Black and to come from this community, as opposed to feeling like it's something that I had to shy away from or also on the other side, constantly defend myself for being. You know, you can end up being angry or ashamed. They would rather I didn't have to deal with that. So I grew up loving being black.
What high school did you go to?
Green Hill. So imagine I'm in middle school, 8th grade. I go in. I'm in one of these one of my after school programs, right? You know, I told you I was searching for one of those. This one was called History Day. So I had a mentor. His name was Donald Payton, and picture History Day is picture science fair except nerdier. Like you dress up as your history project with your boards. Did Billy the Kid one year did superconducting super collider. If you would like to Wikipedia that, I know all about it. Well, he told me about this school called Green Hill, and so he's my mentor. He said you should go check it out. So I went to this informational at the Boys and Girls Club. My mom took me. And they were talking about how great this school is and all this stuff. I don't even remember what they were talking about that day, but all I knew is that I had a tour. So scheduled a tour, went up there, and I'm walking around Green Hill. It's in Addison. It's on the north side. So it took a long time to get there, and I was like, okay, cool. I got there. It's beautiful. They actually literally have green hills, right? Like, you know, it feels like what I thought a college campus felt like. And so I'm walking. There's this tour. There's this tall guy, this kid who's showing me around, and then as I'm walking by, a peacock just walks by the sidewalk, just crosses the sidewalk. And I stop, of course, because I'm from Oak Cliff and in the southern side, and I am not used to peacocks just being there. So I say, hey man, y'all are the Hornets, right? And he says, yeah. I was like, that's a peacock right there. Why do y'all have y'all just have peacocks? He said, well, yeah. He didn't really explain it. It was like the most normal thing in the world for this guy. And so I'm like, I want to go to the school where they have birds of paradise, just meandering about, making their sounds and like spreading their tail feathers. Unhurt, by the way, because at many of my schools, the schools in some of the environments I've been in, you'd have to worry about the peacocks, right? Are they gonna make it? But these peacocks were perfectly fine. So I wanted to go to Green Hill. And when I went to Green Hill, it was amazing because I'd come from the talented and gifted magnet. I thought I was gonna come in here and wreck shop at school because that's what I do. I'm good at school. I've always been good at school. And I got baptized into the difficulty of a college preparatory experience. And the very first day was kind of emblematic of the situation where I'd done my summer reading and I was prepared to tell the teacher exactly what happened in the book. I was going to go, I can tell you what happened on page 62, like third paragraph, second line. I got you, right? So she asked what everybody thought about the book, and this one kid didn't raise his hand, so I was like, first mistake. And then he said, I thought the book sucked. And I said, I don't know wherever the principal's office is here, but that kid's going there, right? Well, turns out she responds back and she says, well, why do you think that? And then they had this debate and like he didn't get in trouble. And that, for me, was a moment. Because apparently you can argue with the teacher at this school and not get in trouble. And that's weird to me. Like, I don't know how to respond. We're sitting in this little semicircle and not in rows. This was a weird place to me. But I didn't know how to be a self-advocate yet. I didn't know how to study yet. I didn't know how to, that the expectation was for you to go to talk to the teacher for help if you didn't understand that wasn't my normal. It took me 2 years to get the hang of that, and because of that, I struggled. I made C's when I'd never had multiple C's. I think I might have had one C before in my entire life, and that was because I was kind of slacking off. But this, I was trying, I couldn't make it. Well, I finally got the hang of it about my junior year, and I finally got my grades up. Well, when I got to SMU, my first semester at SMU was a 3.8. And I was never not on the dean's list there when I was really, just locked in. And I realized, man, I have been so prepared. And I knew I was getting a really high quality education in Green Hill. And I also knew that every night after theater or basketball practice or whatever else I was doing on my way home, we had to cross the Trinity. And one, you knew you were crossing the Trinity because it smelled like the Trinity. But two, you also, knew you were driving by a bunch of neighborhoods. And I was this one kid who happened to live in a household where mom and sometimes dad was willing to wake up at 5 o'clock every morning so that I could go catch the bus in West Dallas at the Boys and Girls Club at the time. And at 6:30, then we go pick up some more kids in East Dallas, Boys and Girls Club. Then when we get to school, right at 8 o'clock or maybe a little bit after. It was a sacrifice. And even though we didn't grow up rich or anything like that, I was privileged to be in that type of family that was willing to make that kind of sacrifice. I got a very generous need-based scholarship when I went up there. And I happened to be at the right place in the right History Day program, talking to the right mentor who told me about this opportunity. And that's why I had a 3.8 my first semester at SMU. And for some reason, that has always felt unjust to me. And I knew I was going to do something in education. I had no idea what, but that's when the seed was planted. It's a long answer. I don't even remember your original question.
I asked what high school you went to, but
there
that was great. You answered a lot of other ones.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me, since you came from a not diverse school at all, was your high school more diverse, or was it just less diverse in a different way?
It was less diverse in another way.
Yeah.
I think there were 4 black kids in my grade. One was Afro-Latina, so I'm going to count her in the Hispanic student population.
So did
Maybe 2?
Did that have an effect on you, like culture-wise?
Yeah, it did. I had my bagel for the first time at Green Hill. Never had a bagel before. And then all of a sudden, so I never had an actual bagel before. Now all of a sudden I'm at a school where randomly on like Tuesdays at 10, we have bagel break, where we do nothing but eat bagels. And so I go there and I'm walking around, I'm like, what are we doing? And they're saying, well, it's bagel break, you can go get a bagel. It's like, all right, cool. So then there's this non-sweet donut with cream cheese, and I'm supposed to be, just chilling and eating this thing. And I'm like, is this what people do? I don't know. It was a little bit of culture shock. Like, that's just one thing. But actually kind of goes back to Adele Turner. I was comfortable in my own skin. I can get to hang out with a ton of people because after school or go over kids' houses and have those kinds of relationships because I had to get back on the bus. I had to get home. And that's kind of the challenge that in hindsight, maybe I miss out, but at the time I didn't feel like I felt like I really loved my actual friendships at school there. And I would say Green Hill prepared me for the real world in the sense that when people talk about white privilege, it oftentimes white people will shut down when they hear the term because they feel like I've never been handed anything in my life. And, or I might have had a really tough upbringing, right? I might have been abused. And you're trying to tell me that I'm privileged? And I can see how people react that way. But white privilege is really the benefit or the freedom of not having to think about race, not having it be a consideration. White people can go the majority of their life without ever actually having to interact in a majority Black, Latino, or Asian space, right? They can have access to high quality schools, great neighborhoods, really good health care, and they're not gonna have to learn about another culture in order to do it. I, on the other hand, and black people and people of color in this country, you have to learn how white folks act. You have to learn how to code switch. The privilege of being white is to not have to go that extra mile to pick up a new language. And I was blessed because by me choosing the school with the peacocks, I put myself in a situation where I would pick up a new skill set that I didn't know was going to be of infinite value for the rest of my life. And that was being able to live, thrive, build relationships in, understand, and read between the lines in the majority white culture. Because now, with that, at least I understand the game to some degree, and I can go get a job that, is in the upper echelon of income brackets, right? I can walk into a gala and kind of know the rules. I can I can sit at a table and know which fork I have to use. Like these really tiny things that seem insignificant, but a lot of times people pick them up culturally, but if you aren't in that culture, you have to intentionally go and learn it. And if you don't know it, then you're immediately flagged as someone who doesn't belong. Kind of like in Inception, if you've seen that movie, I use a lot of movie references. Inception, they're in the dream world and you do something that's outside the norm, everybody stops and looks at you. Like, what are you doing? Little things like that. And how do you measure that? It's so hard to talk about just how many of those micro rules there are, let alone the implicit bias and the structural racism, just everyday living. Black folks and people of color, you have to think about your surroundings and you just, it's the air we breathe. We have to always be on our guard.
So, would you say that you were treated any differently at your high school, or would you just say that everybody was, for the most part, positive?
I feel like Green Hill was a really good space. People were very positive for me. I also understand I'm an extrovert, and one of the things that I built up doing very well as a kid was reflecting. So I can pick up social cues fairly easily, and I do that. I did that initially as a means of survival and protection, but it definitely played a role in me being able to blend and to step into Green Hill and kind of understand where I was. I didn't necessarily change who I was, but I learned, I picked up fairly quickly. That's not everybody's experience at Green Hill who's of color. It's one of the better private schools with regard to understanding the importance of diversity and inclusion. They had some structures and supports that were very important there, but even outside of their intentional things that they did, the most valuable elements for me at that school that helped me to, one, feel like I belong, was male African-American black guys who worked in the high school there, teachers. When I first got there, keep in mind, I'd never struggled in school before. I'd always been the smart kid, which was okay, but also because I'd been taught I'm smart, the first time I got hit with the reality that this academic thing is now hard, my impression wasn't, oh, I worked hard, so that's why I was making good grades. I thought I was just smart. So now that I'm not it's not coming as easily to me. I didn't perceive it as, oh, okay, you need to work harder, you need to tweak how you're doing it. That's why for 2 years I kind of struggled because I didn't really change my habits. I interpreted it as, oh, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. These white kids are smarter. Huh. Well, that sucks. And that's kind of where it was. So I was ready to just adjust my expectations on what life was going to be like for myself. I probably can't be a doctor, or I really shouldn't be aiming at any Ivy League schools because I'm kind of middle of the pack around here, maybe just under that. My black teacher, Abe Waymiller, was the first one to reinforce the belief in me that, no, you can be exceptional. There's something special about you. You're smart. That was invaluable. Because I took that with me when I went to SMU. And when I saw that I could stack up, because high school kids, developmentally, everybody's like, don't worry about anybody else. Yeah, tell that to a teenager. They're constantly worried about everybody else and how they're perceived and where they measure up and how they stack up. When I saw that I could actually produce content at a high level and that I was affirmed in that, then I was ready to take on the world. Which is both good and bad.
So how did you first hear about SMU?
I don't remember when I first heard about SMU, but I know I can tell you why I went there. I met my best friend in high school. Her name was Celeste. She was a 10th grader when I got to college. I was 4'11", 90 pounds as a freshman, and she would make fun of me for being somewhat diminutive. In the glorious summer of 1999, I had a 6-inch growth spurt, so I came back to school and I was like 5'9". I was like, how you like me now, right? But we got to be really good friends, mostly because I needed a ride home. I was tired of the bus leaving me because I had to take the late bus because of athletics. And the dude was so inconsistent. I was the first kid with a cell phone in school, not because we were rich or because I even had a lot of minutes. I have 45 minutes a month. I got a cell phone because my mom got tired of going to West Dallas to pick me up and the bus not being there. And then she had to drive, and so it's like 8 o'clock by the time she gets me. That was old, so we got a cell phone. But I would ride home with my wife. So spoiler alert, I married her later on. I went to SMU because she went to SMU. And I was acting like, no, I'm not chasing you. They have a great advertising program. And obviously I've always wanted to be in advertising. So you can just get over yourself and I'll see you at lunch. But honestly, I went there because I knew that this was the young lady that I was probably going to propose to at some point. And I knew a lot sooner than she did, so it would have been weird if I said it too early. But that's why I went to SMU.
So it didn't have anything to do with academics?
Nope. It was good enough. Yeah.
Do you remember the application process?
There's a lot of paper involved. All these whippersnappers, all these young kids today with their computers and such could do all of that stuff online. There was a lot of paper. I have attention deficit, so I don't like keeping up with paper. So that made me a little nervous, but yeah.
And so, what was SMU's reputation in your community? Like neighborhood? Not
oh yeah, no. Anytime I would tell family or neighborhood or folks at church I was going to SMU, people were like, oh wow, look at you. It's inaccessible. It was kind of like the city on a hill. It's had a lot of prestige in my community, And most people thought I got there on some sort of athletic scholarship, because that's why black guys go to SMU. I saw that in my own community, and I definitely felt it, not from black kids at SMU, but from just about everybody during freshman orientation. It was so frustrating because it wasn't even, hey, do you play a sport? It was like, which sport do you play? I'm like, bruh, I'm here just like you're here, more than likely. You know, I'm academic. And it got so frustrating because it was almost like that was my sport. I had to keep declaring that. It's like, I'm academic.
And so, did you have any expectations coming here? I mean, to SMU.
I was just excited. I was excited about being in college. I was excited about being in college. I was excited about going to the same school with, my girlfriend, who was my best friend, who I was slow rolling my proposal to. I just remember being really excited. And I definitely felt prepared. Academics were actually some of the least of my concern. And that bore out because I knew how to do it. I got my butt kicked in high school, so I felt like I'd been through boot camp already.
So how welcoming was the school when you first arrived?
It was very. Again, I was fortunate because I knew how to be in that environment. I wasn't, by that time, it wasn't culture shock for me. Even with a lot of kids, a lot of students who had gotten there and they're like, good Lord, look at this student parking lot where, you got Benzes, Beamers, and Range Rovers, all that jazz. I'd seen that I'd seen that that was my normal in high school. So I was like, yeah, word up. I don't have anything. Eventually got a Dodge Neon. That was cool. And it was a standard shift, which was great because that meant nobody could borrow it. So, and I was fine with that. I was fine with my little thing. I'd had that adjustment earlier on. It didn't really bother me. I immediately got involved in student activities. That's where I found my tribe. So I never had a problem of, hey, am I gonna rush or anything like that? Or that wasn't really, that's not where I was trying to find my fit. I loved Jennifer Jones, present tense Jennifer Jones. She was my school mom, and was a big reason why I think I felt immediately welcome. She definitely created a cove, a haven for a lot of us. Definitely the black students, and I would say even more broadly, just kids of color.
Did you live on campus?
I did. I stayed in the dorm. I think my first year was a freshman dorm. And I loved it. It was great. It's like camp. I'd never been to camp, but I imagine if this is probably what camp was like.
Did you have roommates?
Did I have roommates? Yeah. I was so clueless. Because this showed you how clueless I was. I was like, I'm going to college, and I think you're supposed to bring like smart stuff with you to your room because you're in college and you're studying and stuff. So I had a globe. I put a globe on my desk, and I came back to the room, and I was rooming with a football player, and he's real cool. I can't remember his name. Maybe Al. I can't remember. Either way, so I came in and we got to know each other. And he was like, man, I thought you were gonna be a straight up square. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, man, I thought you were a nerd, bro. I came in and I see there's this globe. And I was like, oh, okay. I can see how you felt that way. But he was so cool. We had a good time. We really enjoyed each other's company. We met a lot of kids at the same time. We hung out in the cafeteria a lot in those first days.
So, did you get to choose your roommate sophomore year? Or did you not?
Yes. I have no idea who my sophomore roommate was. Oh my gosh, I'm flat out blanking.
It's okay. Do you think that you had a good relationship with them?
I think so. I was never in my room. I was always out. Meeting, going to activities. I was playing basketball, intramural football. I was rarely in my room. So that's probably why I don't remember my roommate. Like, I didn't even study in my room. I was always studying in a group with somebody. I think I just used it to sleep in.
So you mentioned earlier that you found your friend group through your after school activities, but you said that you didn't feel like you needed to rush. Did you feel that IFC, like the primarily white fraternities, did you feel like you were welcome to rush them, or did you not?
So I didn't know that I was participating in any rush activities, but there was this one thing that I did with, because it was a scholarship. It was like some sort of freshman male scholarship. And then I realized, I was like, oh, they're rushing guys. Got you. I'm not interested. And so, but I still wanted the scholarship. I was going to act like I was going to join if they offered me the scholarship, but I didn't get it. One of my best friends, he actually got it, and so he had to, and we made fun of him so hard because he did not care one bit about joining the fraternity. But outside of that, I didn't go to any IFC stuff at all. And it wasn't because I was like actively like, oh man, bump those guys. I just had no desire. I always knew that if I was going to do anything Greek, it was going to be in MPAC. It was going to be one of the historically black Greek organizations.
And so, can you tell me about your time as you were the SMU Board of Trustees student representative?
Yeah.
How was that?
Loved it. I got to know Jean Whitman, who later became the head mistress of Hockaday, and we've worked with each other professionally in a couple of capacities. She actually was a consultant to one of the boards of the nonprofit that I used to lead, Dallas Education Foundation. I think I loved it so much because, you had an opportunity to really understand how universities are governed and how, strategically these massive institutions are run. But I would say if you had to ask me what was the best experience out of that, it was getting to know and building a relationship with Jean Whitman.
So you also were involved in program council?
Yes.
How was that?
That was great because I didn't know what the heck I was doing when I first got there. I just knew all of these cool people who I looked up to were doing it. Chibike Okoro was vice president of programming. Yasmin Tadia was also VP of programming. There was this lady, her name was Britton. She was a president. We just had a blast. And I wanted to be one of those guys. And so I went out for the one that I felt I had the most context for, which was chair of the Black Awareness Committee. And what I learned was that only black people came to the Black Awareness Committee events, which was sometimes frustrating to me.
And so, were you involved in any other clubs on campus?
Yes, I ended up running for and getting one of the student senate spots, freshman student senate. Association of Black Students, ABS. Probably did some more, but those are the ones that come to mind. And then, of course, program council.
And so you did end up rushing historically black.
Yeah, I pledged Alpha Phi Alpha, and that's kind of the moment, right? I was, like I said, I was always into something. And drawn to an extreme, if you don't know who you are, you do anything, even if it's on the good end of the spectrum. Every problem was a problem for me to solve. And the problem that I saw was that, let me pause for 1 second. Every problem was a problem for me to solve. And I was that fixer kid, right? Like that's how I grew up. That's who I was. And I was gonna save everything. I remember even saying that one time, like I was God or something. But that's kind of where my mind was. I also felt like I had the Midas touch, because I had actually been told that growing up. You know, that, you know, if you put your mind to it, you're gonna do it. It was so arrogant, but I didn't perceive it that way. I was here to save things, and I was gonna save Alpha. It had just come back on campus because they'd been kicked off before for hazing. And I was gonna join the organization and hold up the light, hold up the torch. You know, this was the fraternity of Martin Luther King and Thurgood Marshall, Marcus Garvey. It's just rich history. And I was going to be that here at SMU. And then I was, surprisingly, because nobody in my family had pledged Greek, so I didn't know anything about the world. All I knew was that they threw best parties. Also, I knew, and more importantly for me, they defined themselves by leadership and service. So that's what I wanted to be affiliated with. I wanted that brotherhood. And I thought that it would be a good institution for Black men at SMU to feel like they can come in, aspire toward, and be a part of. I learned shortly after I started the process of pledging that there was this process called paper and then real. Your paper, if you only go through the official nationally sanctioned process for joining this organization. The real involves that plus an underground process that definitely falls into the category of hazing. So my thing was, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I am going to then slowly change the organization, almost go undercover, if you will. Because I never fully agreed with the experiences that I was going through. I feel like there could have been a better way. Used to do it like that, but times are changing, and it's going to be time for us to change here soon. But let me go through and get my cred so that once I start to change it and bring more people in who thought like I did, so I have numerical majority, so when we take votes, I'm counting my votes, we can get it done. Then that's how I'm planning the takeover. What I would learn, and this is the lesson that I carried with me for the rest of my life, I had to make personal moral compromises for that strategy. And not just, you know, give a little to get a little, like principle compromises. And I found myself in a place where I never thought I'd be, where I was holding in my arms a friend of mine who had just finished seizing, and his eyes had rolled to the back of his head, and I thought he was dead. That was one of the worst moments of the life that I've lived thus far. I felt like I let so many people down. I felt like I did hurt somebody that I cared for deeply. I allowed him to be hurt. I was offender and standard, and the passive offender as well. And fast forward, SMU has a zero tolerance policy with hazing. This one caught national news. It was in the newspapers. My line brother got arrested on nightly news level television and got broadcast all over the country. And we were going to be made an example of. I was expelled. My line brothers were expelled, and several folks ended up with actual records. Only by the grace of God did I not end up in the criminal justice system. I was this close. I was so ashamed. I felt like I'd become everything that I was running from my whole life. I had lived a lot of my life trying to be the photo negative of my father. An abuser, college dropout, someone who had a ton of potential, but because of his choices and decisions, ended up not living up to a lot of that potential. That's how I perceived my dad. And I look up one day and I can check each one of those boxes for myself. The shame was crushing because you had this kid who was trending toward the M Award and was even in like the actual collateral on the website. Now all of a sudden I'm kicked out of school and possibly even facing jail time. I was a failure in my mind. I was even suicidal for a little bit, just deeply depressed. This is why my faith means so much to me, because at that moment I was in a place where I couldn't help myself, but I felt like God had let me down some paths where I had met people at various points over the course of my life, and many of them were the exact explicit reason, almost another movie reference, kind of like Signs, where you go through and you had those experiences and you didn't know why you were having them at the time. You didn't know why you met these people at the time, but they were my survival. People reached out and helped me when I couldn't help myself. And I got another shot eventually at University of Tulsa because of a gentleman who had taken the time to find out what his purpose was in life. And he felt like it had to do with creating access to opportunity in colleges for kids in Oklahoma. I got a chance to go up there, and he was the only person, felt like, in this entire country who would actually meet with me to hear my story. Because you got to check that box every time you apply to a college. It's almost like having an academic felony. And the academic felony is, have you been expelled from an institution? Check yes. Usually that's file 13 for your application. They got enough kids who haven't been kicked out of a place and haven't, committed assault to worry about. You're not part of their consideration. But I went up to Tulsa, University of Tulsa in Oklahoma, sat down with Earl Johnson. He heard my story. I came back, and a couple weeks later I got a call saying that they were going to give me a shot to be admitted into the university. I wasn't going to have to sit out a full year, as would have been part of the actual policy, I believe, for a kid who had been expelled. And I had an experience up there that I couldn't have written better. I was a transfer junior who knew one person going up there. And then by the end of that year, I'd been voted student body president and homecoming king next year. And I laugh because it's so ridiculous. And I don't say that because that means that I'm awesome. I'm saying that because that's what grace is. That's what'll happen when other people go out on a limb and take a chance on you. And I knew that I was never going to waste that. And because I've been given this second chance, I had an explicit duty to find out my reason for living. And I ended up with a mission statement. It took about a few years after, actually a year after I graduated, but it's the mission of Byron Keith Sanders is love my God with all my heart and soul, to be the husband, father, son, and brother according to what pleases him, and to work diligently and daily in my most sincere efforts to pursue my appointed purpose with honor, character, bravery, and love. And when I got that nailed down, I kind of knew what I was supposed to be doing. I was actually in pharmaceutical sales at the time, and I realized that that wasn't it. So I had a duty to find out what it was, and it was education. I went back to an organization called Group Excellence, and we actually started it as undergraduates at SMU. Carl Dorval, the CEO, one of my best friends in life today still. We started this mentor tutoring company when we were at SMU. I had to let it go because I got kicked out. And I came back when I left Pfizer, and I knew I was getting on this purpose-driven path. And we went there, and we served a lot of kids. I was as enriched by the work as any of our students. I remember a lot of the faces and names. I bumped my head a number of times, but we learned how to run an organization. It was a social enterprise, and we were fifth fastest growing education company in 2011. Got to be an Inc. 500 institution. And it was a beautiful story. Matter of fact, it actually ended up being part of their capital campaign. They used, SMU used the story of Group Excellence with Carl Dorval in their World Changer Shaped Here capital campaign. I, have stayed in this education space, in this service and civic space, even when I went to work with the bank. And now here I am at Big Thought. What was interesting is that it all came full circle in 2012 or 2013. I can't remember exactly which year, but I'd gone back and I set up a meeting to meet with Dr. Turner because I was the president or the chair of young leaders in education out of the Simmons School with an expulsion on my record. And so I always wanted, it was awkward because technically you actually can't come on campus if you're an expelled student. You're forever forbidden from being there. And anytime I was on campus, I'm like looking around, kind of checking over my shoulder. It's this weird thing. I'm staying away from SMU PD, all that jazz, desperately trying to avoid parking tickets. But I would say like, why don't we meet off campus? And they're like, we could just go. I was like, nah, Starbucks is great. Come on, La Madeleine is great. Anywho, it got so awkward at some point. I was like, all right, do you think President Turner would just write a letter so I could come back on campus? Spoke with Gene Whitman and my good buddy Chris Botti, and they said you should go for it. You should ask. I was so ashamed. He was the last person I met with at SMU, and he said that the expulsion is final. And this would have been 10 years ago to the time when I was meeting with him, asking to meet with him. I came in, we learned about each other's life since then. We caught up, shed a few tears. That was when I learned that he had made some calls on my behalf for me to get into University of Tulsa. I didn't know that. He never told me. And he called the president of Tulsa at the time, who since passed away, Stedman Upham. And that was one of the main reasons why they decided to let me in. Go figure. But he eventually wrote me that letter. And then later on, that next year, that would have been 10 years to the year that I was kicked out, I got another letter that said, by paraphrasing, by official action, under the power of the president of the university, my expulsion was expunged. He said it was something he had never done before. He didn't have record of having done it before. He said, if we're gonna do it, he said the life that I'd lived since is probably about the bar at which we would set for this kind of action. And I just started crying. Not because I so desperately wanted to go back on SMU's campus. It's a great institution. I was very grateful to be welcomed back into the community. But for me, it was the story coming full circle, and for me, it was a manifestation of grace and forgiveness and the power of other people. And so, to some extent, I feel like the life that I've been able to build for my family and for my career and anything that I've been able to do, I feel such a tremendous debt of gratitude to every single human being who's had anything to do with shaping me, molding me, forgiving me, and providing me an opportunity to give. That's who I do anything that anybody think is worth a grain of salt. That's who I do it for. I carry those people with me. So when people ask me how we're doing, even just how you doing, sometimes I'll say something like, "Oh, we're good," or "We out here, man." I'm talking about them as much as I am myself.
So going back to your time at SMU, can you name a couple of your most memorable experiences?
One of them was 9/11. I was a freshman. I remember I was in Humphrey Lee when we heard about, I was in I think it was called integrated marketing class. It was a marketing class. I was in the Humphrey Lee building when the first plane hit. I can't remember if it was the first one that we heard about was the Pentagon. I think it was. Then, it was this weird feeling. It was kind of like, current event update, Pentagon's been bombed. What? Went to breakfast after that, and we're watching, we're hearing about updates. I can't remember if there was a TV in there or what, but we're getting updates. That's where I was aware of, or might have even seen video of the first tower being hit. Then later on, I was going to I think it was my required gym class in freshman year, and I was going up the stairs, and there was a TV right there. God, I remember it. I smell it. I can feel the rail even. And I saw the second tower collapse, and I thought it was a replay of the earlier collapse. And I was like, there's only one tower. Both towers are gone? I was amazed. I remember that. I remember I went out and bought a newspaper. I think my mom still has it. I bought a newspaper that had nothing to do with what just happened, because that's how newspapers are. They print them the night before. And then I got one later on that day too, that had the entire story of what just happened. We had a gospel choir called Voices of Inspiration. I think it's still going these days. They sing, last time I saw them perform, they did way better than we did. But we took that gospel choir took a trip to New York in October. And when we went up there, the bus got lost and ended up going down the wrong street that took us right to ground zero. And I'll never forget that. So that's one of the most memorable things that ever happened.
So what did you end up majoring in? Or what was your planned major at SMU?
The plan was originally advertising, because again, that's why I went there. Not really. I changed that, I think, my sophomore year because I was like, I don't want to just do advertising. So I changed it to business marketing. So I said, you know, if I want to do advertising, this is under the umbrella, it'll fit. So that's what I was going to major in. That's what I ended up majoring in when I transferred to.
And so, was there a lot of diversity in that major?
Nah. I mean, it was as much diversity as everywhere else at SMU, which is not much.
And so I know that you were more prepared for the lack of diversity there, but did that still have an effect on you?
By that point, did it have an effect on me? No. Well, I guess it did show up. I was always, especially in business school, you always have to do group projects. I was pretty used to not being the first. I usually ended up on the group last. And our groups usually ended up being like the best. I'm not competitive, a little bit. But it was also, that actually, so now that I'm thinking about it, no, it was a chip on my shoulder for sure. I was always going to, we are going to destroy every other project in this class because in the early classes, when you don't really know, you know, people in the business school were all getting there at the same time. Nobody really knows each other, so they're not knowing who the smart kid is in the class. I was never assumed to be the smart kid, and but I was gonna work my butt off, and we were going to be one of the best. I do remember that always being something that was definitely a very pertinent thought, a very prominent thought in my mind during business school. And I ended up, I mean, I got the, you know, outstanding marketing graduate award at Tulsa, you know, but it was kind of on the same track at SMU, and I think I was driven largely because of that.
So, I know there was lack of representation in the student population, but was there any representation in the faculty?
No.
So did that have any effect on you? Or did you feel you were treated differently by the staff?
Yes, but here's why. Because of those social cues I was telling you about. And this is actually a secret that I tell young men of color when they're going off to college. I knew how to be perceived as unique because I presented like, you know, a black guy. Again, everybody would think you're an athlete or something. I'm wearing hip hop stuff or urban wear, whatever. I didn't wear my first pair of pants that fit until like my junior year, right? There was always big stuff, baggy stuff, whatever. So I looked like an athlete when I showed up, or at least somebody who, you know, was urban. But I would always sit in either the front row or the second row, maybe third row furthest away. I would always raise my hand and contribute within the 1, 2, or third question asked. I always looked dialed in, even though sometimes I wasn't entirely interested. But because I did that, I knew what the expectations were for black kids, and particularly black boys or men, young men. And I knew that if you defied that, then you could build in favor with teachers, so that if ever I needed a little bit of slack, I could get it. If I needed, you know, if I turned in something a little bit later than usual, it would be okay, because we would make it happen. It was interesting because that delta was the difference between the bar of their expectations and where I would deliver. And I knew that that would almost give me extra points.
So, going past your time at SMU and past Tulsa, can you tell me more about your transition to professional life? And I know that you already kind of talked about it, but
yeah.
How you ended up here.
I ended up here because of that mission statement that I told you about earlier. It's driven every decision I've made. And I want to affect education, broadly speaking, in this country. And I can come up with a 5-year plan. I've never seen a 5-year plan stand. What I'm more interested in is being present, being aware of what I am needing to do in the moment in time where I am, in the era or the time period in which I'm working, making sure that I'm being as much use and service toward the end of my my mission as possible. How many people can I serve? How many people can I love? How many people can I help in the context of the priorities that are laid out in that mission statement? And so each moment, each step that I've taken here has not been particularly intentional. The only intentional move that I've made where I was like, and actually, I mean, it was to group excellence from Pfizer. Everything else has been an opportunity that I knew was the right opportunity at the moment in time.
Can you tell me exactly what Big Thought is for?
Yeah, Big Thought. We are a 30-year organization. We are committed to closing the opportunity gap by unleashing creativity and strengthening kids' social and emotional well-being. We do that in the out-of-school time places. We do that in our after-school and summer programs, and we build capacity for that to happen even more broadly, systemically. We're right now based in Dallas, and we have about 150,000 kids that our work touches every year, either through our direct programs or our systems facilitation. So we carry a fairly large footprint, which is why I thought this was a wonderful organization, because we have a platform where we can not just program well, but we can possibly, if we do it right, we can even help change the narrative about what's important in some of the issues surrounding the need for our programming, like trauma, segregation, racial equity. The fact that we need people to truly believe that these kids are capable of greatness. That's the only reason why we're not seeing it at large. That has everything to do with our systems as opposed to their individual capabilities.
And I know you gave a TED Talk at SMU, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me about that TED Talk and why you wanted to do it?
My dad was dying at the time. It was a bit of a love letter to him. The TED Talk was, I did two. I did TEDx Kids that year, and then I did an actual TEDx SMU. The TEDx Kids one was about the concept of prodigy, which is people don't expect young people to have a voice. So when young people actually do have a voice, they have extra power because of, again, the delta between expectations and how they deliver. And we've never seen a revolution in this country happen without young people on the front lines. So that was what I said to the kids. Broadly speaking, in TEDx SMU, I was talking about the power of mentorship. And that what you're doing as a mentor is you're being a walking billboard of everything that you say they can expect for themselves out of life. And the other thing is, it's not that these kids are incapable of living these wonderful lives of fullness and joy and service. It's that oftentimes they haven't been given the permission to believe that that's even something relevant for themselves. And I use an example of my son, who would wake up in a bed, his little baby bed at the time, he was like 2, and he would yell for me to come and get him. And I would go in there, I was like, you can get up. Then he would jump up and start playing. I was like, Saturday morning. But the reason why he did that is because he had just come from a crib. In a crib, that's what you do. The bars are there. The entrapment is obvious. So even when those bars are not there and they're just bars in his mind, he still stayed there and he still needed that permission. So me coming in and saying, hey man, you're free to live your best life. That's what a mentor does. That's what a mentor is.
So speaking about mentors, I know that you mentioned a couple of them. Do you still stay in touch with any other mentors at SMU?
A lot of my co-conspirators in civic work are SMU alums to this very day. I talked to one of my SMU friends or counterparts, not just keeping up, but actually doing work together weekly. Those relationships have meant everything to me. Some of my closest friends in the world were people that I met at or spent a ton of time with at SMU.
So do you remain involved with SMU, besides this project, of course?
Yeah, I was at Young Leaders in Education for a number of years. I still go back. I was speaking at Simmons for one of the PhD programs for school leaders just last month, maybe a month ago. I'm up there fairly regularly. Do a lot of work. I mean, we do work here with SMU. Center on Research and Evaluation. They're our evaluator in one of our biggest programs, Dallas City of Learning. It's a system that we facilitate. So yeah. Still tied. I'm a hybrid. I'm part Mustang, part Golden Hurricane.
So you mentioned you started a family. Can you tell me about them?
Yeah. Bailey and Bryce. Those are my two kids. And they come from the blessed union between me and Celeste. Celeste is one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in my life. I learn from her daily. And she's, quite frankly, magic. Because of how awesome she is, I have some wonderful children. And Bailey is my oldest. She's my daughter. She's my not stoic. She's actually very goofy, but she's organized. She's detail oriented, very process oriented, extreme rule follower. How much more time do we have, by the way?
We have like 18 minutes.
Okay.
At the most. But
all right.
Like we can be done in like 5.
Cool. Let's do that because I got a guy that. Can we pause for 1 second?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So my family. My daughter, Bailey, is, I'm gonna have a double-digit preteen kid this year, which is really kind of, I don't understand it. I don't know what's happened. I think I've been in a wormhole, like time is just accelerated. And here's this kid. She is my beautiful, strong, so kind, detail-oriented rule follower who has truly embraced an identity that loves being Black. And she also perceives herself as a leader. And she also perceives herself as a hard worker. And we have brainwashed them to believe those things. And then it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. She plays tons of sports. She loves soccer. That's her favorite. And she just got into Tag Magnet Middle School. And I shed a couple tears that day because I was like, oh, just like her old man. My son, Bryce, is our little miracle baby. His story in and of itself is, I mean, we could go for a while on that, but his full name is Paul William Bryce Sanders because Paul means small, William means protector. He stopped moving and borderline stopped breathing when he was in utero, which caused us to have to do an emergency C-section. And in that emergency C-section, The doctors discovered that he was fine, but it was my wife who was in peril. And if we had not been at the hospital that we had been in, and if we had not gone in the time when we went in, which was premature, then I'd be a single parent today. We were at the only hospital that had just brought over an experimental procedure in blood transfusion that got blood to patients 5 times faster, and that's why she's alive. But we wouldn't have gone in had Bryce not been acting weird in utero. And to this day, there's no medical explanation for why he did. And we feel like it was a modern day miracle that has saved our family. He is basically me, much shorter right now. Even the things that frustrate me so much, he has attention deficit disorder. But he works so hard and he is whip smart. Like he gets things he just gets things very quickly. He also forgets things extremely quickly. And I know a little something about that. I've lived that life. I understand that. But again, he's one of the most loving human beings I've ever met. Adult, child, whatever. He loves touch and loves being hugged, and he feels so secure in who he is. Like I swear, the boy would hold my hand anywhere, right? And I'm like, it's 100 degrees. I need a little space. But he is just so full of love. He likes building. He's a tinkerer. He builds things. He has this beautiful visual mind. He can visualize everything. I can go on about the children for a while. But that's my family.
So, is there anything that you feel I've missed that you want to further discuss from anything?
I feel like I've given you a lot. So,
Yeah, that was all of my questions, so thank you.
Okay, cool.